Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, it's Jessa. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. I am so glad that you are here. I'm talking today about sex. And specifically, talking about sexual concerns with your partner, sexual problems, sexual struggles, sexual dissatisfaction. So this is not the episode about, talking about what you want or, creating sexual encounters, what's pleasing to you and what's pleasing to your partner. This is more about when things are not going well and how hard it can be to bring that up with your partner. Lots of people struggle with this. I developed a whole guide about this, which is sort of what I'm talking about. It's available as a free download. I'll put the link in the show notes. But I'm going to cover that in some detail. So it sets you up to have constructive conversations with your partner and change it from being perhaps adversarial or at least competing and getting you guys on the same page as partners, as friends, as collaborators, and creating the sex life that works for both of you. That, I think, is the biggest obstacle. Hope you enjoy the show. So today I'm talking about sex. And the reason I wanted to cover this topic is because so many couples not only struggle in their sex life, they have challenges, fears, difficulties that they encounter, but it's almost like bringing up the topic to their partner to address it is the biggest obstacle. I mean, I would say that one of the first things that happens in therapy when I work with a couple is we create this container where it's okay to talk about it. And it's amazing how easy it can be to address the problem sometimes once you have opened the conversation, once you've gotten over that fear of talking about your struggles and what that might mean and how your partner's going to receive it. Once you're aligned and you're going to tackle this as allies, as partners, improving your sex life is not actually that hard. There are ways to handle the challenges and there's ways to overcome the obstacles or to at least to adapt to them. And there are ways to be creative and think outside the box and work together. And, it's not that difficult. I feel like introducing the conversation and tackling that is the biggest step. And I can understand that a lot of you may, be fearful of introducing this topic, of bringing it up and opening Pandora's box in a way. So today's episode is to help you do that. So there's sort of three different stages, I would say, for having this conversation. And I want to start with preparing for it, because this is not the kind of conversation that you just sort of want to waltz in without any thought. I guess it depends on the severity of your concerns and the state of your relationship. But in general, it's going to help you to be prepared in advance for the conversation. So a few different things you can do if you want to talk to your partner about sex. Start with getting clarity. Think about what's going on for you. Think about what it is you want and how, what your experience is and how you're going to frame this. So give a little bit of thought to what happens in your sex life or what doesn't happen. How does this sort of dance go around having sex or not having sex? What's the sort of the choreography of who initiates and how does that go? And what's the response? And do you think about initiating and not do it? Sort of what's the pattern the two of you have gotten to? And then what feelings does that evoke in you? How are you feeling? Now, remember, those are emotions. We're going to talk more about this later today, but feelings are emotions. So basically they fit in the categories of sad, mad, glad, and afraid. So do you feel sad? Do you feel hurt? Do you feel afraid? about the state of your relationship. Really try to hone in on what's going on for you. And related to this, but very, very different, is what are you thinking? So what do you wonder? What's the meaning you've made of some of this stuff? What do you believe about what's happening? Where might you identify your own assumptions and the stories you've got about what's happening, both for you and for your partner? Because we definitely make up stories about what's happening for our partner. So get some clarity about what you're thinking about what's going on between the two of you. Then see if you can get specific about what it is you want. So spend some time sort of fleshing out this vision you have for your future that you desire around your sex life. Now, it's not going to be terribly helpful to think, oh, I wish we could go back to when we were 22. There's no going back in time, but maybe you can visualize the parts of your sex life that you miss and how that might be, I guess, appropriate to your stage in life and your age. What it is you envision and sort of flesh that out. It's not like you're necessarily going to get this exact vision, but if it were up to you, what is it you would want, right? What is it you long for? So spend some time getting clear about your perspective. Okay. Then spend some time preparing for the conversation, getting clear about your contributions to the patterns that you're in now, to the problems, to the struggle. I tell clients all the time, every situation is co-created. Every single time. Sometimes it's very easy to see our part, and sometimes we really believe it's all our partner. So it might take a little bit of digging to uncover your role here, but how is it that you're playing a part in this pattern or this cycle? So, how do you focus on your partner's behavior and attitudes rather than yourself? Like, how much are you caught in that trap? Do you believe something is wrong with them? And that they are either deliberately trying to hurt you or deny you, or maybe you think they are oppressed, or they must have had some trauma. How much have you sort of pathologized them? How are you behaving in the face of these difficulties? Right? So how do you act with your partner? What do you say? What do you do? What's the mood? Is there any way that your behavior could be driving your partner further away, or is entrenching the two of you in the cycle? How well do you talk about what you want? Have you been advocating for your needs and your wants without, and where have you been blaming or pressuring or coercing or guilting your partner, versus figuring out a way to sort of cleanly express your needs? And then how do you stay grounded and neutral or unreactive in a conversation? Or do you get really escalated and sort of, emotionally dysregulate? Like how is your emotional response to this stuff? Shutting the process down, shutting down your partner, driving them away, making them retreat, right? These are ways you behave that could be at least exacerbating the problem. The last step in preparing for the conversation is developing empathy for your partner. So, you've spent some time thinking about your perspective and your role, but see if you can put yourself in the shoes of your partner ahead of time. Now, you may not be totally right. You probably won't be totally right, but see if you can develop some empathy ahead of time about what might be going on for them and why their behavior or their role would make sense. You're trying to create some space right off the bat for both curiosity and empathy, and understanding that neither one of you on both sides of this equation are having fun, right? It's no fun to be struggling with sex. There's no way your partner's enjoying this. So how can you see that their behavior makes sense in the system that you have? What do you think they are feeling? And what do you think they are thinking? What are their beliefs or their stories that might be making this worse? And what do you think they want? And here's a big one. See if you can think, what do you think they're afraid of? So you're really trying to see your partner's behavior in the best light. You're trying to give them grace and benefit of the doubt and really understand that you guys are both trying, but you're stuck. Okay. So that's actually a fair amount of work to do before you even bring up the conversation. So you're really spending some time thinking and analyzing this stuff. Okay. So then the next step is to approach your partner about the topic. Okay. So first of all, pick a time. Don't just blindside them with a conversation, right? Or throw something out right when you guys are they're getting out the door for work or out of the car. You want to be intentional about setting a time for talk. Now, you don't also want to always put it off because there's never a perfect time, because that's true. There's never a perfect time. But see if you can choose a time or ask to schedule a time to talk. It can be helpful too to set a time limit. Like, let's agree we're going to talk for 15 minutes or half an hour, and we're going to do this in stages, but something so it's not overwhelming to either of you and you both have a sense of what to expect. Then it's really, really important to introduce this whole thing from a really positive place. So if you have been struggling for a while, you guys might have been having conflict. There might be a bunch of tension about this. You may not be feeling exactly like teammates, but you want to approach this as teammates, basically saying, I want our relationship to be as good as it can possibly be, and I want to work with you to make that happen. I want us to work together on a sex life that really works for both of us. Blaming, attacking, pathologizing is not going to get you far. But if you can come at it from expressly wanting a good relationship, heartfelt, you need to feel this too. Wanting to solve it together, wanting a solution that works for both of you, that's going to go a long way to setting up the conversation for success. And you need to know that this is going to be an ongoing process. So just like I said, you might want a time limit of, 15, 30 minutes. Like, you're not going to finish the whole thing that quickly unless your problems are pretty simple. So recognize that this is a process and you're just taking the first steps. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. Maybe experiment, maybe trying new things, checking in with each other as you go. So realize that this is not going to be one talk. This is going to be probably a series of talks as you guys explore and collaborate and potentially even negotiate solutions that really transform your sex life. So as you actually have the conversation, so we talked about preparing for it, approaching your partner about having it. And now we get into the nitty-gritty of how do you actually talk about this stuff. So again, the most important thing is to truly have an attitude of collaboration. So you may still have some work to do if you're pathologizing your partner and blaming them and feeling like you have not been part of this. You got to go back to step one and spend more time until you realize everything's co-created and you've got to play your own side of the court. So really work to maintain this attitude of collaboration. And whether you speak it or not, if you feel like they're at fault or you feel that you believe that they're broken, you believe that they're at fault, you believe it's their problem, no matter what language you use, that's going to come across. So you really need to overcome any urge you have inside to be blaming them or to be thinking only about their parts of this instead of your own. So you sort of constantly have to be pulling yourself back onto your side of the court and stay in this place of wanting to be teammates and allies on something that works for both of you. Okay. Goodwill basically is the bottom line. So if you're feeling angry and blaming, you probably have to step back again and do some more work to transform that and then come back with goodwill and partnership to work together. You definitely want to talk about your experience using what's called I language. And you may have heard that. It's not a new concept, but talking about yourself instead of the other person. So it's not you do this, you do that, you do that. There's not much you in this at all. It's I. So you're sharing with them the clarity that you have about yourself when you were preparing for this, what you see happening. What I see happening in our sex life, what I feel about it, what I think about it, what I want, what I picture, all of it's about me. It's not about you. So I'm just sharing my experience, my perspective, which is totally valid. And so is yours. So we don't need to feel like we're competing or one of us has the true perspective and one doesn't. We just sort of stay with this I language, describing our own experience, our reaction to it without making it about the other person. Don't label or judge them. You've got to let go of this idea that you are necessarily right about what you think. Okay. You've got to recognize that you're making meaning out of things. You've got thoughts and beliefs that may or may not be accurate. Your feelings are certainly valid. We have those, right? You're trying to explore what's going on and your experience of it, knowing that your partner has an equally valid experience of what's been happening. Hey, it's Jess. I'm just taking a little bit of a break in the middle of the show because I want to tell you more about my first round of teaching webinars that I'm doing all about navigating desire discrepancy. So this is almost universal in the clients that I work with. They're struggling with the fact that one of them wants more sex than the other. And of course, the reality is that that is always true, and you don't always have to struggle with it, but it's really, really common. So I'm hosting a webinar. It is totally free to go over the 4 mistakes people make that get them stuck in these dynamics that are so problematic. I would love to have you join me. All you have to do is go to bettersexpodcast.com/webinar. You can get signed up. Again, totally free. Got a couple different choices of times. I hope you'll join me for that. I know I told you in the prepare stage that you're going to want to try to empathize with your partner in advance, but what you don't want to do is tell them how they're feeling and what they're thinking. While you have created some space for their experience by doing that, we're going to wait for them to share with you what they're actually thinking, feeling, and wanting. We're creating space through that exercise. And I've gotten to this a little bit as I've been talking, but it's really important in these conversations to distinguish between what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And I want to say universal. It is so prevalent for this language to be misused in our culture. I do it. I had to catch myself earlier in the episode. If you listen again, you will find that. We tend to label our thoughts as feelings, and then we feel entitled to them. So if I say, I feel abandoned, you can't challenge that because you can't tell me how I feel, right? They're my feelings. But abandoned is not a feeling. Remember, feelings are emotions. So your emotions are fear, remember, sad, mad, glad, and afraid, basically. So sad, hurt, afraid that you're leaving the relationship, right? Sad, hurt, afraid. Those are all totally valid. But the belief I have that you're abandoning me may or may not be correct. So distinguishing between these two things is difficult, and it takes a real sort of discipline and paying attention, but it goes a long way to making these conversations easier because we can empathize with each other's feelings and we can explore the thoughts and what parts of them are accurate, what parts aren't, how much of this is attached to the way we grew up. We have these filters about how we see things. Naming our thoughts and beliefs as this is a meaning I've made, or this is a story I have, or this is what I wonder is happening, or this is what I think is going on. All of a sudden, we're sort of holding it outside of ourselves, and we can examine that. We can evaluate it. That settles this conversation down. Okay. So another example is, I feel like you don't want to have sex with me, and that I'm not important enough for you to make any effort. But again, that's not feeling. I feel like, not a feeling, okay? You feel sad, you feel afraid, you might feel resentful, but you think your partner doesn't desire you, and you think they don't value enough to work on your sex life. So you can explore whether they want you sexually. You can explore your importance to them. There may be other things going on. It's a whole discovery process where you get to learn what part of that is accurate and what is not, but you look at that together. So it's also important in this conversation to recognize that we all have what I call a filter, and we have our reactions to what's happening, like what you may have heard the word triggered before. Okay. So you've got to manage your own triggers and reactivity in the conversation. I believe it's each person's job to sort of diffuse their own triggers, as opposed to it's your job to avoid your partner's, because that just puts too many things off limits in conversation. But this filter idea is we are all influenced by our upbringing and by our experiences. It shapes what we see and the meaning we make of things in a really dramatic fashion. So things that seem true to us are not necessarily true or accurate. It's highly filtered and impacted by what we have come to expect based on our environment growing up. So this is part of why isolating our thoughts from our feelings is so important, because when we talk about what we believe and think, all of a sudden we can examine, like, why would that be the meaning I make out of this event or the series of events? Well, it relates to my upbringing. I'm more prone to see it as abandonment than I am to see it as you taking care of yourself or something like that. So you're working in these conversations to understand your own filter and then to manage your own emotional state. Okay. So if we go back to this example of, feeling, now we know it's thinking, my partner doesn't want to have sex and doesn't care enough about me to work on it. The next step might be to say something like, I realize I feel sad and resentful about the lack of sex in our relationship. I feel afraid that I won't be happy in our sex life and that that's going to damage our overall relationship. And I have the story that you don't want sex at all and that you don't care enough about me to work on it. And this belief keeps me distant from you. And I can tell it's in the way. Will you explore that with me? Another important tip in terms of having this conversation is to empathize first and then respond. So rather than get defensive or argumentative or launching into making your own case, each of you should listen to the other and empathize. Listen to what they're saying and make sure you understand it from their perspective. Okay, it does not mean you agree with it. And I think this is where a lot of couples fall down, as they think, if I empathize with you, if I validate your view of this, it means I agree and I have lost. That's not what this is. Okay, you are trying to get in their shoes and see this experience from their perspective before you even touch how this whole thing went for you. If your partner starts to share what's going on for them in your sex life, you just want to understand what they're seeing, how they feel, what they think, why this all makes sense. Because believe me, both of you make sense, given your backgrounds, given your filters, given the way this stuff landed on you, given the meaning you've made. Of course, you're stuck. That's where you want to get to. And you want to be able to articulate this, not just as like a paraphrase or some of that active listening stuff, although, it's useful. But basically, you want your partner to be understood and to know that they're understood. So you go back and forth until it's like, I can totally see why you react that way, that this is how you see that. And then you feel like that and you think like that. And it would make sense why you shut down or whatever. Do I have everything? Ask for closure. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there something more you want me to understand about your experience with this? No. Okay. Well, then we've closed that loop. Then it's your turn. Well, this is how it is for me. And then your partner provides the same service of empathizing without defensiveness. That's the goal. It takes practice. Okay. This is not how many of us interact, but this is what you want to get to. So then you've got these two perspectives and worldviews and experiences sort of on the table side by side. And they're both valid. They both make sense. Then we have to figure out, okay, what's actually happening and how are we going to work together without competing with each other? But it goes a long way to realize, wait, you're each having experiences that make sense on both sides of these sexual struggles. And again, you're going to need to manage your own reactivity, your own urge to get defensive or explain yourself, the distress you might feel when you start to feel like you're being made wrong or you're blamed, the reactivity you might get out of such a sense of desperation or fear, right? There's so many different things that activate all of these emotions, and we're going to need to be able to self-soothe and ground ourselves as we proceed in these talks. Okay, so you've got to develop a capacity or a tolerance for feeling unsettled, unsure, not knowing how this is going to end yet. Instead of looking for just reassurance and sort of a quick fix, can you tolerate that ambiguity really as you're working through the process? Can you calm yourself down and can you stay in it instead of needing to shut down? Now, you can definitely take a break if you need it. If you're starting to get super triggered and activated, it is okay to realize that and say, I need to take a little break. And then I've got to come back and engage again when I've calmed myself down, because we're not going to have a constructive conversation if we're in our amygdala, if we're in our sort of emotional animal brain. We've got to be in our thinking brain for this to go well. So if either one of you gets really triggered and can't bring yourself back down to the ground, it's okay to take a break take a deep breath, calm yourself, then come back and re-engage. And so, just like I was saying, this is a process and it's going to take some time. This is why we have to take it in stages and steps. Okay. We also have to let our partner take a break if they need it. So you can't insist like we have to settle this now if your partner is all triggered. It's not going to be a constructive conversation. So no matter who needs the break, the other one has to accommodate that. Then you come back together as you can. Stay committed to the whole process. Know that this is going to take time. Sex is very personal. It's intimate. You could be very entrenched in the dynamics that you are stuck with. I mean, so many people don't address this right away. So sometimes this stuff has been really persistent, so it can take some time to have the conversations and to start to dig out. Okay. You're going to have to actually demonstrate that you're serious about taking it on by showing up repeatedly, not just having a conversation once and then letting it go for 6 months. That's part of how people get stuck. They fight about it once and then nobody talks about it for months and then they fight about it. Like that's a cycle. So you want to demonstrate that you're committed to the process. You're going to keep doing your work about, empathizing and being open and emotional regulation, but you're also going to keep bringing it up. Commit to changing your behavior. You already spent some time analyzing your role in the dynamics. And as you have conversations with your partner, you may very well hear some more things that you're doing that contribute to this. So take those seriously, decide what you're willing to change, and then be good about doing that. Okay. And I think maybe my last tip in this is, this will take a little explaining, but don't have sex that makes it worse. So one of the ways you can change the status quo and show that you're serious about this is to stop doing the things that have been so negative or even toxic in your relationship. Now, this doesn't apply to everybody that has sexual struggles, or you may not be so deep in them that you've gotten to this point. But sometimes couples get to a point where they're having sex they don't want to have, where they're checked out, where it might even be hostile, believe it or not, where you're sort of going through the motions with each other and not making any effort to connect, like it's not based in love or even friendship. That kind of sex, we sometimes start doing that because that's all we get. And it's sort of fallen down to this lowest common denominator, or sort of the bottom of the barrel. And we're still doing that. We cause more harm to ourselves and to our relationship by having that sex than by having none. So you might think, I need to be doing this because it's all we've got. But no, you may be actually doing harm. It's not worth having, and it's digging into these patterns that are not bringing the two of you closer together. So if you really want it to be better, if you've gotten to this point, I would say don't have that sex. Turn it down. Don't just check off this box or be willing to settle for that anymore. Don't be willing to just go through the motions or do things that are hostile or dismissive of each other. So, wait for and insist on a better sexual relationship that works for both of you. And, taking that kind of a step really shows you're serious about changing the dynamic that you've got. I mean, I know this has been a lot to take on. I actually have a guide that I've written up that covers all of this, available for free. I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can download it if you want it. It's a big deal. I know how difficult it can be to open this topic. It's so loaded. It's so personal. It can be so emotional. And I want to help you have a very successful process with your partner because believe me, I really believe as soon as the two of you can work as a team and talk about this constructively, fixing the problems is going to be so much easier. That's not the hard part of difficulties in sex. The hard part is having these conversations in a way that really get you on the same page. I hope it works.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, There are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.